Welcome, everybody. Welcome. We're just delighted that you've joined us tonight. My name is Anita Friedman. I live in San Francisco, and I'm a member of the board of directors of the Shalom Hartman Institute. And we're honored to have you here. We know how important this issue is to you, that inspired you to come out on a Wednesday evening to engage in this conversation. And we're especially glad to welcome Rabbi Hartman and Imam Antepli to San Francisco. So
Thank you.
this is a good place to engage in this kind of a dialogue. I'll make a few introductions, and then I want you to give some thought to your questions. We have some cards that will be distributed through the audience, and you should write down your questions, and then we will have a chance after the presentations to have some conversation and answers to your questions. So there'll be staff who are collecting the questions from you. All of us know, and I imagine that's why you're here, that we live in a world that's desperately in need of leaders and good leadership. We face many, many challenges in this world right now, and we find ourselves searching for answers. In the Jewish tradition, there's a key question, which is if leadership is the solution, if good leadership is the solution, then what's the problem?
Lack of it.
Give that some thought. Lack of leadership. Close. Close. The answer is failure to take responsibility. Failure to take responsibility. Not so with both of you. You have taken responsibility at a time when it takes a lot of courage to engage in this kind of conversation. We're grateful to you for inspiring this kind of conversation in this community. I just came back from the Middle East, which underscores why this kind of dialogue is so urgent. Although, as I told Rabbi Hartman, my Uncle Solomon asked me how my trip was to the Middle East. He said, "Tell me, Anita, in one word, how was it?" I said, "It was good." And he said, "In 2 words?" I said, "Not good." So, welcome to this conversation. This evening is sponsored by the Hartman Institute, and we wouldn't be able to have this kind of a dialogue if it weren't for the generosity and the leadership and the vision of Barney and Barbara Osher and Maurice Canbar. Thank you, both of you, all three of you. I'm glad all three of you are here tonight for making this conversation possible. This community is one of the best, the kindest, and most respectful communities on earth because of people like you. We are interested in forging a new kind of dialogue between Muslims and Jews. We think this is the beginning of this kind of dialogue. The approach that we'll take and that our speakers will take is that each of us speaks from our own tradition, from our own story, from our own principles and values, and talks about what our communities need to do differently, and doesn't focus on what you need to do differently. And I think that creates the basis for really constructive conversation. So I would like to take a minute to introduce our speakers and the Shalom Hartman Institute. Many of you know the Shalom Hartman Institute. I know that many of you who I spoke with earlier in the upstairs reception have been involved in one way or another in all these years in the conversations. The Shalom Hartman Institute, based in Jerusalem, and now also the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America, is one of the centers, the preeminent centers of discussion on Jewish philosophy and Jewish theology and interfaith dialogue and pluralism and democracy in Israel in the world today. They are based in Jerusalem, but have opened up offices throughout North America, and the San Francisco Bay Area is one of the primary areas where the Shalom Hartman Institute is operating now, with more than 100 seminars for educators and for clergy and for lay leaders throughout the community to elevate the discourse. And so it's a real honor and a privilege for our community to be the beneficiary of their extraordinary intellectual leadership. Rabbi Dr. Donniel Hartman is the president and the director of the I Engage project, which is a conversation that I know many of you told me you've been involved with around Israel and Israel's role in the Middle East. He has a PhD in philosophy from Hebrew University, a master's degree in religion from Temple University, a master's degree from New York University in political philosophy, and he was ordained by the Shalom Hartman Institute as a rabbi. He's the founder of many of the most extensive training programs and research programs in this area, and has written many books. His next book that's scheduled to come out by Beacon Press in February, I believe, is very appropriately titled, Putting God Second, How to Save Religion from Itself.
Only a Jew can say that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. So that's exactly what we will be discussing. Imam Abdullah Antepli is a senior fellow on Jewish-Muslim relations at the Hartman Institute and co-director of the Muslim Leadership Initiative there, which is a major initiative bringing Muslims together for dialogue on the issues that we face. He's the founder and executive board member of the Muslim Chaplains Association and a member of the National Association of College and University Chaplains. He represents a Muslim voice on campus. He's an adjunct professor of Islamic studies, and on issues of faith and spirituality and social justice, he is a major, major voice in our country and certainly on campus. So we're delighted that you're here.
Thank you.
We know that we're facing a tremendous amount of turmoil in our own community, certainly on campuses and throughout the world. We're going to discuss those issues, and we're going to ask Rabbi Hartman and Imam Antepli to speak for about 15 or 20 minutes each, and then, as I said, we'll be collecting your questions and we'll open it up for a conversation with you. So join me in welcoming Rabbi Hartman.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Anita, thank you. And Abdullah, it's a pleasure to share a stage with you. Whenever we're together, it's a good day.
Indeed.
Tikkun olam, to repair the world. That idea is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it motivates and challenges the Jewish people to ask, don't look just at issues of what you're supposed to eat and candles in your home and your synagogue. Look to what extent you have something to contribute to a whole universe. You're here on earth not just to survive. The central question of Jews is not just Jewish continuity. It's also, how do you serve as a force for good in the world in which we live? Tikkun olam as an idea motivates us. But the problem is that Tikkun olam as an idea also could disempower us. Because it's too big. I don't know how to repair the world. I truly don't. We're facing issues today which seem to be so far beyond our capacity. We're frightened. Around the world, people are frightened. Around the world, there is so much hatred. How do I repair the world? I don't know. Tikkun olam sometimes sounds like a utopian idea. But utopia literally means nowhere. And so, when I speak in those terms, sometimes I feel I am nowhere. I don't know how to repair the world. And I don't know how to even repair my neighborhood. My neighborhood is deeply, deeply in pain right now. But I do know how to begin to think about what I could ask myself and ask my people. What are the things that we could do that could have a positive influence? I'm not going to litaken. I'm not going to repair. But I don't want to stand still as an individual. Religious faith, more than it is faith in God, religious faith is the belief that the world in which we live is not fixed. It's not predetermined. It's not closed. I don't live in a dead end. I live in a world in which tomorrow can be better than today, and depending on what I do, it might and might not. I can't repair the world, but I could begin a process of evaluating myself, asking my community, what do we need to do, and how ought we to think differently? As Anita said, one way to repair Jewish-Muslim relations here in North America, which is our theme for this evening, is for me to give Abdullah a list of all the things that he has to do differently. And as any of you who've been in couples therapy knows, good luck with that one. That is really, things will go much better that way. Yes, everything that's wrong is you. Yes. Save your money and stay home. But it's no different here. I'm not in a competition as to who's more at fault. And I'm not in a competition as to who is more to blame. I know that I am part of a tradition, and we just finished Yom Kippur, in which the whole idea is that human beings by definition are flawed. That human beings by definition could do better. And that there is, if you fulfill all your aspirations and all your values, it's usually because there's something wrong with your aspirations and your values. On Yom Kippur, what is the essential prayer of Yom Kippur? The vidui, the confession. And that confession is not me standing up and reaching over to Imam Abdullah's chest and saying, you have sinned. You have dealt falsely. We have sinned. We have done wrong. What is it that we could think about as Jews to help repair our relationship with Muslims here in America? And tonight I'd like to offer two concrete ideas. Two very specific ideas. That I, my institute, my staff, and I hope all of you will think about as we try to walk forward in a different direction. The first starts with the Shahadat, the core statement of faith in Islam. La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is the prophet of God. That is a statement that defines and is the foundation of what it means to be a Muslim. The first idea that I want to present tonight is that we Jews have to learn not merely to recite, but to accept the Shahadat as Jews. Lest some of you believe that I am calling for you to be Muslim, don't worry. I'm a little more nuanced than that. If all that Islam was there is no God but God, Jews, Christians, and Muslims could get together very easily. There would be no problem Jews, Muslims, and Christians sitting together and recognizing that all of us are worshiping the same God. That all of us are trying to find a life of meaning as we try to understand what God wants of us and why God wants that of us, so that we could be a force for good. The problem starts with Muhammadun Rasulullah. The problem starts with the fact and the statement that Muhammad is the prophet of God. We Jews and Christians are very comfortable accepting the legitimacy of each other's religious traditions. We didn't do it in the past, but today, do you remember the times in North America when we Jews had to protest against those who said, very often in the evangelical community, God doesn't answer Jewish prayers? And we fought. And the Christian community, by and large, got up and said yes, and this starts already in Vatican Council II in 1962. We accept that, and we reject the supersessionist ideology of Christianity. That to be a believing Christian does not mean that I have to reject the authenticity of the prophecy of Moses and the covenant of God with the Jewish people. While there is one God, that God doesn't necessarily have to love one people best, and that God does not necessarily have to express God's will in one way and in one word and in one Torah. Christianity took that step. That's now mainstream Christian ideology across the Protestant and Catholic denominations. They've opened up their door and say, Jews, you are authentic worshipers of God. And we Jews have reciprocated, by and large, if we think about it. We accept Christianity as a meaningful, vibrant, significant religious tradition, as an authentic way to worship God. We don't believe that our religion, while it is ours, that the individual choice that we make doesn't mean that our religion is exclusive or necessarily superior to. It's other than. And that Jesus and the Christian Bible reflect a deep, profound, meaningful religious life and the Word of God. But what we Jews and Christians do to each other, we don't do to Islam. If we want to build a different relationship with Islam, we have to begin to internalize that Muhammad is the prophet of God. He is not my prophet, but he is a prophet of God. And he represents the will of God. And he puts forth a challenge and an obligation to be a force for good in this world. But what do? We are all experts at everyone. What do Jews and what do many Christians, and I'll speak mostly as Jews, I'm speaking as the Jews today. What do Jews know about Islam? We know all those verses in Islam. We're the experts in every single verse in Islam, which either states or can be interpreted that the challenge and responsibility of Islam is to kill us and to attack us. Jews know those verses in Islam more than they know Jewish scripture. Jews could cite to you when jihad and what surah it is mentioned in the Quran more than they can tell you what the third 10 commandment is. We're experts at that. But we all know that both Judaism and Christianity have numerous verses and numerous chapters which command us to do evil to the other. And what we have done is we have taken responsibility for our traditions and reinterpreted them, and we don't define either Christianity or Judaism by those chapters. Those are the chapters that we have chosen to reject. Those are the chapters that we have chosen to reinterpret. Those are chapters which we have declared, you do not define me. The devil, as Shakespeare says, doesn't misquote Scripture. The devil quotes Scripture. And our job as religious people is to lay claim to those chapters and to, in many ways, exercise them from defining our spiritual life. And that is what we've done. Our job is to challenge each other by opening up the doors to enable each one of us to be free from those chapters. Now, I know that there are many Jews and Christians and Muslims in the world who think that it is not the devil who quotes those scriptures, but those are chapters that define them. But here in America, and tonight is about America, and there are multiple other places of light in the world where we are choosing not to be defined by those chapters, but to define ourselves independent of them. That is the engagement of religion with modernity. The first challenge that we Jews have, if we're going to begin to talk differently, is to accept not the fact that Jews, Christians, and Muslims all have a relationship with Abraham and Sarah. How sweet and quaint. We'll find the 3 verses in each tradition that are the same. That's not respect for the other. That's love of self, as long as the other mirrors yourself. Our challenge is to say Muhammadun Rasulullah. And by doing so, create the opportunity for an Islam which wants to live in modernity and wants to join in the conversation, to not have to be defensive, to not have to constantly say, no, I reject terror, I reject terror. No. To say, let me tell you what I stand for. Our job, first job, as Jews is to internalize the legitimacy of Islam as an authentic and meaningful and valuable word of God which can contribute to the world in which we live. And just as we had to seriously engage in a reinterpretation, so Islam does. But to believe that the only one of the 3 monotheistic traditions which is so profoundly flawed that they cannot reinterpret themselves, despite the centuries and centuries of evil perpetrated in God's names by our scriptures, and to say only Islam is flawed, that is not only intellectually poor, it is morally corrupt. Let's welcome the third partner into our moral universe. God does not just answer Jewish prayers. God does not just answer Christian prayers. God also answers Muslim prayers. And the second idea comes from within the book of Leviticus. A verse that everybody knows. Leviticus teaches us that you must love the stranger, and the stranger must be to you as one of your citizens. For you were a stranger in the land of Egypt. What's essential about this verse is not the love of the stranger. What's essential about this verse is a principle of how we Jews understand our obligations to others. Our obligations to others is determined by our history. It's not merely some Kantian moral principles, theoretical notions of categorical imperatives which define how you should treat another human being. That too. All human beings are created in the image of God. All people have inalienable rights. All people have rights not only to freedom of religion, but to respect and to dignity. That's true. But our tradition says the way I want you to walk through the world is that when you see another, I don't want you to see the other. I want you to see where you were at a different moment in your time. It's not the love of the stranger that's innovative here. It's the fact that I want you as a Jew to remember every single moment of pain in your history. Not so that you could kvetch. Not so that you could be the victim of history. We love being the victim. So that I can account for every single time somebody did something wrong to me. I want you to remember your pain. Because if you remember your pain, you are going to become a force to ensure that that pain is not experienced by somebody else. Since my work with Abdullah, since my work with MLI, which is a program trying to attract and generate a new conversation with 200 young, religious, social activists, journalists, artists, leaders in the Muslim community across North America, I see things differently. When I hear that it's acceptable to say in America that there cannot be a Muslim president, when it's acceptable for people to say that Islamic faith should be illegal in the United States. I remember that I was a slave in Egypt. I was there. I was there when people said there can't be a Jewish president. We were all there when our tradition did not have place of respect in the public sphere. I sit and wonder, how does a Muslim child feel? What do they feel? An American Muslim child who was born in America, who has been a loyal citizen of America their whole life, who has never dawned on them to neither harm another human being or to see America as anything more than their home and an expression of the ideal place that they want to live. When that statement is made, we are creating a ghetto. We are creating an emotional ghetto. We were there. We know better. And if somebody attacks Islam, and if a politician attacks Islam, do we put them in our column? Oh, we won one. One more for us? Are we in a zero-sum game? No, it's true. I live in Israel. I'm not politically naive. I live in Israel. I don't take security issues for granted. I am alive only because of my willingness to embrace and respect power. And I know in a world which is not utopian, a world which is here, power and the use of power is a fundamental moral force for good and for safety. But I'm not talking about security tonight. I'm talking about how we as Jews are going to begin a process of repairing ourselves. Will we have Muslim dialogue partners? I don't know. Just so happens that I have found. It just so happens that Imam Abdullah is showing me that there are hundreds. But I'm not even doing it because I know, or I'm not claiming that I know I'm going to repair the world. I know that we have to repair ourselves. What is worthy of us? Who do we want to be? Religion is of value only to the extent that it creates a life of value. What do we want to stand for, my friends? I dream and hope for a day that Jews and Muslims could see each other, not merely as the descendants of Abraham. That language is sweet. I'm not interested in sweet. that we could see each other as friends, that we could see each other as partners, that we, who are minorities here in America, could be allies, could learn from each other, could help each other. I dream of a day that here in America, Jews and Muslims could begin to develop a relationship with each other, that in Israel it's not yet possible, and in my neighborhood it's not yet possible. Maybe here it is. Maybe the greatness of America, the Constitution of America, the values of America could enable us to begin a different conversation about each other and with each other. But to do so, we have to start with khatati. Muhammad is a prophet of God. And anybody who acts towards another person in a way that is derogatory, disrespectful, and discriminatory is the enemy of the Jewish people. When we do that, we will have repaired our house. And if we repair our house, who knows what might be repaired tomorrow. Thank you.
Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. Oh, somebody's teaching Arabic here. From the moment I met Rabbi Hartman, and I don't think I ever told you, I felt very strongly, especially tonight, that your last name is misspelled. I think, in addition to your intellectual brilliance, you are a man of heart. And therefore, your last name should be spelled as H-E-R-A-R-T-M-A-N, not Hartman. And quite honestly, if we can only produce people of heart, not naive, not intellectually weak, but part of the problems that we face is too much head, very little heart. Very little voice of heart, very little prism of heart, very little windows and eyes and lights of heart into these complex, difficult issues that we are facing. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here again with my mentor and friend, Rabbi Hartman, in the right spelling. After a year, we were here about a year ago, and in so many different ways, in our own tradition, we both, with a sense of urgency, said, we have to improve Jewish-Muslim relations in the United States. There are things which are possible between Jews and Muslims. If we tap into that potential, it's not possible anywhere else. And what's happening in the Middle East and the toxic energy, negative energy produced there is further polarizing us, dividing us, pumping hate and bias and stereotype to each other's hearts. And I regret that in the last 14 months, things have gotten a lot worse. With every cycle of violence, things are just getting worse. I think the title of this lecture, saying the children of Ishmael and children of Israel should be or must be eternal enemies, in the honest and the spirit of honesty, I think first action, we have to acknowledge that we already are enemies. In so many parts of the world, we are already enemies. Children of Israel and children of Ishmael already, maybe individually, they may not be enemies. But collectively, socially, organizationally, if you look at our reflexes, the way we treat one another, the way we look into each other, the way we reduce each other's traditions into silly stereotypes, I only can speak for Muslims today, and that's what we do. We only do that kind of stuff to our enemies, not to our friends. So let's acknowledge, before I beat my Muslim heart and internally criticize myself, that's where we are. We already have become enemies. We already treat each other like enemies. So, like Rabbi Hartman, we didn't exchange the notes, but it's so interesting how our hearts beat together. I can tell, why do you think we are already enemies? But why to depress the crowd? Already sufficiently depressed with what's going on in the world, especially the despicable recent violence, cycle of violence in many parts of the world where we have a lot of emotional attachment. But if I have to speak to my Muslim community, as I have been speaking both in verbally as in action, there are things that we need to do if we are planning to improve Jewish-Muslim relations in the United States. And like Rabbi Hartman suggested for his own community, we didn't plan this. It's so beautiful. I want to go back to the main source. For Muslims, I suggest we have to recite Shema a couple of times a day. We have to, because the problem stems from there. We have to be able to say, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. I know my Hebrew pronunciation is much better than many American Jews. And I take this as a medal of honor. If Judaism was all about the latter part of this testimony, where my Jewish brothers and sisters say a couple of times a day, as for those who's, if it was all about God's oneness, Islam and Muslims would have no problem with Judaism, Jews, the way they practice their religion, or the kind of issues that we are facing. But as Muhammad Rasulullah, Muhammad is the messenger of God, is the main obstacle where we have to grow and take it to the next level, as Rabbi beautifully said. The challenge for Muslims is the Shema Israel. We have to bring ourselves, especially in the United States, that God spoke to children of Israel in the way in which that story is. It's not my story, but it's even more complicated that Islam traditionally have perceived this speech, God speaking to the children of Israel, in many episodes, unfortunately, as a superstitionist fashion. Maybe God has spoken to children of Israel, but we came as a new version. And that speech, that covenant, that relationship, and what it entails, somewhat irrelevant. It is really conceptually and theologically and emotionally, this is one of the biggest mental Muslim block that we Muslims have to work towards and push the envelope. That there is a legitimate story in this Shema Israel, that God spoke to children of Israel, which entails their journey as they believe it. We have to bring ourselves to a level of honesty, openness, and respect to say this is a legitimate story, which will then allow us to understand, not getting into the toxic political Middle Eastern, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that whatever that entails children of Israel's attachment to that part of the land, their ability to live up to that covenant, whatever that entails. You know better than I do. But we Muslims have to bring ourselves to that toxic, self-destructive understanding of Jews are, at its best, a cute minority, where for centuries we treated them nicely. We let them open their synagogues, worship however they like. The 21st century Jews and Judaism, their sense of connection to that speech from God, Shema Israel, is different. And if we are really honest as Muslims, and if we really would like to see American Jewish-Muslim relations to the level that it's supposed to be, it's strong enough and healthy enough to stop the importing the violence, despair, and hopelessness from Middle East, and reverse that energy and export hope, inspiration to Middle East from United States, we first have to bring ourselves to Shema Israel's story and have to understand and acknowledge and endorse and not shy away. It's not our story, but it is a legitimate story, which ultimately has to bring ourselves, which is, I'm going to say something slightly controversial in many Muslim circles, but that's our challenge. For many Muslims, for many Muslims in the United States, they are two-statists like myself. And they have no problem accepting and acknowledging the legitimacy of the state of Israel to exist. but for pragmatic reasons, but because they surrender to the reality, because they give up. It's a sense of compromise. It's already there. But we have to understand that's not enough. That we have to bring ourselves to the legitimacy and the authenticity of that story for our fellow Jewish Americans. And for that, we need a lot of help. Because the story of that state, story of that connection, the story of Zionism, for a lot of Muslims, as we hear it, it is a crisis narrative. Israel Zionism, it's all a post-Holocaust Western reality. But there's a different kind of story that I hope we will bring ourselves to a level of sophistication to learn. And I hope our Jewish conversation partners will be able to articulate that Zionism of longing, that Shema Israel, that story and the Jewish people connection to that covenant and ultimately manifesting itself as a state in the Middle East. This, and I'm not naive. I spent all my years doing pro-Palestinian activism, working in Palestinian refugee camps. I am not numb to Palestinian suffering. I am not blind to the plight and the human rights violations that they go through. This is in no disrespect to that suffering. But this is somewhat irrelevant at this particular point. We have to bring ourselves, regardless of how it happened, how else it could have happened. There is a cry for legitimacy that we don't hear. You know, that's what enemies do. What enemies do at its best, they don't know even what hurts the enemy, or they don't care at its best. Or at its worst, as we often do to one another, as many Muslims do to many Jewish brothers and sisters, we know exactly where it hurts. We know exactly which button to push. By denying, by insisting or intentionally being blind and deaf to that cry for legitimacy, that Shema Israel never happened, or even if it happened, it's a myth, it's a mystery, that there is no connection there. It's all about land grabbing, colonial invasion, and all sorts of accusations. We're not going to go anywhere. So it's so interesting that Rabbi Hartman said we have to bring ourselves to understand the legitimacy of Shahada. My suggestion to my own community, and in many ways, I think I'm not only, as Rabbi Joshua Heschel said, when I say I think, I am not only praying, asking, only verbally. I am praying with my actions, with my feet, with my hands, to make sure we will get there. Did I already use up my 20 minutes? Because something in America, as this, I don't want to over-idealize. As you hear from my thick Turkish accent, I wasn't born here. I grew up in different parts of the world, but when I traveled, what's the healthiest society in the world? What kind of healthy society will take the static, frozen state of affairs in Islamic theology, Islamic world, for many, many different reasons? Muslim world is not doing well. I'm not telling you most well-known secret of the world. For all sorts of political, historical, religious, cultural, colonial reasons, the Muslim civilization is experiencing its collapse, which effectively, when a civilization collapses, not only its stock market, not only its roads and economy collapse, its intellectual world, its theological world, its vibrancy and dynamism in responding to the modern challenges collapses as well. You know, when I spent a month at Shalom Hartman Institute, and I walked through the halls of Shalom Hartman with an intense holy envy, intense jealousy that there are no such institutions in the Muslim world where Muslims can go and study Islam, Islamic theology, Islamic philosophy and spirituality in such a critical, through the lenses of modernity and enlightenment, for all sorts of reasons. But in America, because this is for all what we have, this is one of the healthiest society, America promises something to revive and resurrect that dynamism which innately and inherently exists in Islam and throughout the history. All it needs is a good context. And there are about 7 million American Muslims living in the United States. And it provides an incredible opportunity. But this opportunity can only be realized, I think one of the biggest missions, if American Islam will be as American as apple pie, also as kosher as Islamic as Muhammad, it requires itself to be in conversation with all sorts of people, but especially with the Jewish community. One of the milestone and important stations in indigenizing, producing indigenous homegrown American Islam, which will bring the best of Islam, which will bring the best of Islamic thought, Islamic theology, is one of the biggest obstacles is our ability to understand and bring ourselves to a healthier, stronger relationship with the American Jewish community. And I categorically reject that there are no Jews to talk to, as many of my fellow American Muslims in despair. There are no Jews to talk to. We cannot have a critical conversation. This MLI program, modestly but profoundly, has proven that there are conversation partners that we can talk to. We just have to bring ourselves to that level of honesty, that level of self-criticism, and that level of openness. I will end with the commandment to the children of Israel, but I will say it to my own people. In the Psalms, God Almighty says to the children of Israel, sing me some new songs. Sing me some new melodies. It's a commandment. It's a voice from Sinai saying, do something different. And I think if I take that commandment to myself, not only we have to be able to sing Muslim, Hina Matovu Manayim, Shevet Achim Gam Yachat, or Ozer Shalom Bim Rumav, in a different tone, we have to sing it together. If we are going to glorify God's name, if we are going to make Hashem smile, if we are going to pull ourselves out of misery, in many places it's almost impossible, but in America it is possible. We can only do this if we can sing new songs to the Hashem, to God Almighty together. We can only bring ourselves, if we can only bring ourselves to accept the legitimacy of each other's story. Thank you, and God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to ask that the questions be collected so that we can ask our guests to our speakers to respond. But let's start with a question that I'd like to pose to both of you.
Sure.
First of all, I want to thank you again because you exemplify both leadership and a willingness to take responsibility at a time when many people aren't. But eventually, all brilliant ideas deteriorate into work. So let's talk about the practical realities. For example,
Sure.
I think all of us here are very aware of what's happening on campuses. The tensions between Muslims and Jews, the tensions about the Middle East. What is your vision for what should happen in dealing with issues? I mean, you spend a lot of your time on campus, right?
Oh, yes.
And I know that you also, Rabbi Hartman, spend a lot of time with the issues on campus. So share some of your thoughts about that.
Sure. I have been a college Muslim chaplain for about 15 years now. And it's so painful to witness the rapid deterioration of Jewish-Muslim relations in general, and also seeing the increasing struggle within the Jewish community, how, forget about Muslims and Palestinians, how the Jewish community is becoming increasingly polarized and divided over the issue of Israeli-Palestinian conflict in general, Israel in particular, especially around the rising movement of BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. So in math, you know the issue, right? If you take things into parentheses and put -1, makes everything opposite. So Jews and Muslims, and Jews among themselves, they are singing Hina Matovu Manayim in a reverse way. as they are not supposed to. Some of the practical things that I will say, again, with the acknowledgement that we are acting like as if we are each other's enemies. And in reality, in many corners, unfortunately, that's the case. In terms of what to do, if I have to say and speak for my Muslim community, and I will say a few suggestions to the Jewish community. If we are planning to bring Jewish-Muslim relations to a healthier, stronger level, first, we have to diversify our information about the other. The way in which we Muslims, and I know for many Jews that's the same challenge, we are consuming a very one-sided, it's not inaccurate, I'm not questioning that, but we are consuming a very unhealthy, we are nurturing ourselves, quote unquote, with a very biased information about the other. As many troubling realities of the Muslim world is shaping the image of Islam and Muslims, for many of my Jewish brothers and sisters, the same thing is happening. The same thing is happening for the Muslim community as well. What's shaping the image of Judaism as religion, Zionism as an ideology, and Israel as a state is nothing positive. Somehow we have to bring ourselves to diversify our sources of information to one another. Second, this is even more important, we Muslims have to stop investing Jewish renegades. We have to stop investing in each other's renegades. I think if you look at the speakers, which keeps dividing on campuses and everywhere else, are people who have problems with their own communities. We are already enemies. We already have this monstrous negative image about the other. All we need is a validator. Somebody from that particular community to come and validate the kind of negative image about the other. And we have to stop that in terms of action. What I have to suggest to my Jewish brothers and sisters, I have to say, for those lovers of Israel and the friends of Israel, you are losing it a big time with the millennials on college campuses. And part of it is unfortunately self-inflicting. Part of the damage is done by good people doing a lot of good work, but being counterproductive. Part of it is throwing money to programs or organizations which makes things worse. A lot of organizations which can hold a meaningful conversations around this issue and bring our communities together, unfortunately, instead of doing that, they are doubling down the propaganda. They are doubling down the partisanship. 15 years ago on college campuses, criticizing the state of Israel and anti-Semitism, there was a mile distance where Jews, Muslims, there was a space where we can negotiate, where we can talk, where we can criticize certain policies of the state of Israel and without slipping into the anti-Semitism shore. Over this division, over this alarm, that space in some campuses went into 2 inches. Like there's no space. There's no space. Jewish community, the defenders of Israel, I think they are doing this service to their own cause by becoming ultra-sensitive and partisan and by not allowing and creating meaningful spaces where certain legitimate criticism can take place, where the meaningful disagreement and can be aired and shared. Otherwise, this will continue. You know what this does? Forget about if I'm not taking too much of your time, that ultra-sensitive, giving no space to legitimate criticism, forget about the Muslims. It's alienating large number of Jewish students. Large number of Jewish students are going to the other direction. Just to tell you how big enemies we are, and in so many ways we swallow so much hate with each other. This is the last thing I will say. Because of the work that I do with Shalom Hartman, I receive so much heat, attack, criticism, and opposition from a lot of Muslims. One of my friends 2 weeks ago and said, you know, I'm so angry with you what you do. Don't get me wrong, he said. I don't like BDS either. I am not a big fan of BDS, but I'm criticizing for what you do, etc. And I said, why don't you like BDS? You know what he said? Too many Jews in it. If there are way too many Jews, for him it's not kosher. Like he cannot trust. Significant part of that division and polarization on campuses and elsewhere is run by Jewish money and Jewish motivation and Jewish participation, it should not fuel the fire as if this is Jews against Islam or the Muslims are running the show solely.
Thank you. I think it's very important when it comes to criticism of Israel to identify who it is that you're talking to and whether there's something to even talk about. When we Jews have made a lifelong career of criticizing ourselves, we criticize everything about ourselves. We don't have a single hero in the Bible that the Bible doesn't take great pains to tell you how imperfect they are. That's our tradition. We don't trust anything that's perfect. And if you think you're perfect, we're going to correct you. So the criticism of Israel is not an anti-Israeli or anti-Jewish act unto itself. That's what we do all the time. But when there is nothing that Israel could do correctly, when Israel is the only personification of evil or only state which is morally failing, when we are the only evil empire somehow undermining peaceful coexistence, when it goes to that, when Israel could do no right, then in fact what takes place is the space between anti-Israel sentiment and anti-Semitism indeed becomes 2 inches. And when I'm confronted with anti-Semitism, my response is simply to defend myself. I don't engage anti-Semites in dialogue. I don't. It's just not effective. And so part of our work on campus has to be to defend ourselves and to create a space for people to express their Jewish identity and connections to Israel despite these types of attacks. And even though many of these attacks, at least half of them, are motivated by Jewish causes. So I don't know how to defend ourselves against anti-Semitism because my general approach in life is that those who perpetrate evil are responsible for their evil. And I have to defend myself against it. Very little dialogue with evil. But, as you said, not all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism. The most significant thing that we need to do on campus is how do we create a vibrant connection and a loving relationship with Israel. It's not on us to ask, how do I change the anti-Israel sentiment on campus? That's not in my power. And anybody who thinks they could do so is deluding themselves. Especially that which is motivated by anti-Semitism. And here, just echoing what Abdullah said, everything that I have learned throughout my life is that people have a more vibrant connection to Israel when they feel that there's an environment to talk about it and to bring their feelings to the table. When we create loyalty tests, when we shrink the conversation, when we say if you're pro-Israel, you have to have position A, B, C, and D, then we undermine the space for people to be a part of and connect to Israel. Please remember, the Jewish tradition does not have a creed. It's not that we don't care about faith. There isn't a creed that in order to be Jewish, you have to accept A, B, C, and D. But what we haven't created about God, very often we're creating about Israel. We're creating a creed. You have to accept A, B, C, and D. And in so doing, I can't defend against the anti-Semite, but I can create a place where Israel could be alive. But if we create a creed that you have to be this, this, and this, and if all we're doing is fighting against and not creating a conversation about what is the Israel we want, what is the Israel that we aspire for, what are the gaps, how do we correct them, then not merely are we not defending against the forces who are attacking us, we are actually strengthening them and causing more and more of our children to definitely not defend themselves against BDS, but even more deeply to simply walk away from any relationship with Israel.
We have a number of questions here that are related to the Middle East, and I want to raise some of these questions for you to address.
Now,
Is that a better? Okay, thanks for turning that on. A number of the questions have to do with the issue of the Middle East. That a number of these questions have to do with the Middle East because the question
on people's minds.
Is it possible? Yeah, it's on people's minds. Is it possible in some way to have a Muslim-Jewish dialogue in America that's divorced from the connections and the feelings and the inflammatory energy that emanates from the Middle East? Is that even something that we can think about? And how do we do that?
I hope nothing you heard today is even suggesting that. I hope nothing you heard today is suggesting that let's forget about Middle East as American Muslims and American Jews. And I know neither for Jews nor Muslims, it's impossible, and we shouldn't, for Muslims to divorce themselves from the suffering of their Palestinian brothers and sisters, for Jews to divorce themselves from their loyalty, from their Shema Israel, basically, and to the legitimacy and the existence of the State of Israel. But what I think we are saying, or at least I'm saying, is in America, it's possible to talk through Middle East, but still remain in relationship. If we can invest in our overarching American identity, this beautiful, blessed land is giving us an opportunity, despite those deep attachments, unbreakable attachments, and irreconcilable political differences, we can still do better. There is a potential that this land provides us that we haven't utilized yet.
I am Zionist. I love the state of Israel. I live in the state of Israel. And I believe that the Jewish people have a right to sovereignty and to live in peace and security in their homeland.
Yeah, we figured that out.
You figure that out. At the same time, precisely because I'm a Zionist, I am for the creation of a Palestinian state. As a Zionist, I believe that my people have a right to sovereign expression, and consequently, I could not deny that from Palestinians. Palestinian people also have a right to sovereignty. And I pray for the day that the reality will be such that a two-state solution living in peace and security will be possible. I yearn for that day.
Vimru, amen.
Now, what I yearn for in America is, can a Muslim, just as the majority of Jews of America, who say, I love the state of Israel and I believe that the Palestinians have a right to a state, could America also create a Muslim community which believes, I have great sympathy for Palestinians, I believe Palestinians have a right to a state and I'm against the occupation, but I also accept that the Jewish people have a right to a state and to sovereignty. That dual side, why is it? It's because we're living in this zero-sum game conversation. Now in Israel, again, it's getting more complicated. Our job here in America is not to bypass the Middle East. And actually in this Muslim Leadership Initiative that we're engaged in at the Hartman Institute, the major venue for the education takes place in Israel on purpose. Because the elephant in the room in Jewish Muslim conversations is Israel. And a lot of Jews and Muslims get together, and again, we talk, and we don't talk about Israel. It's like you'd go to therapy, but instead of telling the other one what they're doing wrong, there's no problems. We're fine, everybody's just fine. No, there are real problems. But if we could confront it, if we could talk about it, if we could disagree, we Jews disagree about what we should do. If we could all share, and this is an educational methodology that we try to work on at the Institute, if we could work on the values that we're committed to, even if we disagree about the political expression of those values, we could create a community of conversation. We have shown now over 3 years, in the midst of the war in Gaza, in the midst of Intifadat al-Aqsa, in the midst of stabbings, in the midst of terror, in the midst of, from a Muslim perspective, occupation and war and killing of innocents, both of us had our stories. Not only did we not stop talking, the program tripled in size. Not only did we not stop talking, but the urgency of the program deepened for all of us. We understand what's on the table. So it's not about bypassing. But what America teaches you to share the public space with another. Part of what we have to learn how to share is the conceptual space, as Imam said beforehand, so that we could see the other. And part of that comes through and goes straight through the reality, which is the State of Israel.
State of Israel. Let's talk for a minute about what this means with our youth, because there are several questions here that have to do with our youth. There's a major parting of the ways. You talked about the elephant. You talked about the elephant in the room. There's a parting of the ways. You see with Muslims, they see Jews, they think occupation. You know, Jews see Muslims, they think terrorism. Okay, how do you inspire and teach a next generation to be more tolerant?
I'll start with my people. The greatness of a people is never judged merely by their achievements. Everybody's going to fail. Every country's going to fail. Every person's going to fail. That's inevitable. The question is, what do you do with your failures? Do you idealize them? Or do you say, Khatati, I have sinned, and you yearn to repair them? One of the most effective ways to create a relationship between our children and the State of Israel is not to over-idealize the State of Israel. If you over-idealize it, you are creating a reality in which our children believe that the State of Israel is not a state of value. Israel is a great country. We do phenomenal things. Phenomenal things. We are a deeply moral country. We are a good people. But we also make mistakes. And we've made mistakes. So let's put them on the table. I think the occupation is a mistake. I think we have not done everything in our power to enable the creation of a Palestinian state. I believe so. That's not Hartman Institute policy, that's my personal belief. I yearn for a two-state solution, but as you said, yearning is not enough. What are we doing about it? So in 2003, we offered the Palestinians 97% of the land. And in our narrative, they said no. So they said no. It's 2015. Offer again. Offer something different. No. I offered, they said no. That's it. We're done. The Jewish people who have introduced some of those vibrant creative ideas in the world, a people who could withstand the most difficult realities and not just survive, but thrive and create and reach levels of excellence. That's it. We're done. I offered and they said no. Nothing else that we could do. Is there any way that you could increase a sense of hope amongst Palestinians? Is there anything that you could do that even if right now a political solution is not going to be possible, that's it, we're done? That's not us, my friends. And if you want to attract our children, it's about getting them excited about the Israel that they could connect to. And if there's a gap between the Israel they could connect to and the Israel that is, get them excited to work, to fight, to create that Israel. But when you tell them that love of Israel means accepting of positions that they don't think are of value, if they don't see Israel as a carrier of value, then they will not be a part of it, not because they're rejecting their Judaism, but because they care about their Judaism. Right. Because they care about it.
Right. Imam, why don't you comment a little bit about how you view the state of Muslim youth with regard to this question?
When Pew search about American Jewish community came out, the report was published early afternoon. Next day, there were 9 voice messages from across the country from Muslim communities,
Yeah.
alarmed, leaving messages basically saying, you seem to know something about Jews and Judaism. Come and tell us how we cannot end up there. Like for them, that kind of challenge of assimilation, of this melting pot. I think in many ways our youth not getting the kind of leadership that they need, that they feel
From the
both in the
Muslim leadership.
Muslim community,
Right.
that the people who are in the leadership, they are imposing their realities
Right.
on them. And they don't necessarily feel that they are heard and understood, as most of them are second generation. There are a few of them here in the audience as well. That they don't feel the leadership, the gatekeepers, not everybody, but really understanding the dilemmas of the beginning of the challenges that American society, American melting pot, American assimilation is imposing on them. One another challenge which I'm fighting is the way in which we do Israeli-Palestinian conversations, the way in which we are being pro-Palestinian. That's also not giving a lot of space for those conversations. It's sucking the entire energy out of the room, which makes a lot of born and raised American Muslim youth incredibly frustrated. That there's only way, I can only be an American Muslim, or I can shape my American Islam only through the prism of one type of activism, one type of political ideology. That for a lot of, it creates a lot of alienation and rejection within the American Muslim
Alienation and
community.
rejection of what?
Organized religion
Religion
altogether.
in general. They just want to be a,
or American Muslim identity, or organizations.
they just don't want to be a part of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. So, one of the questions that we got from the audience has to do with the Jewish community in relation to this. The Jewish community is facing the same issue of youth not wanting to identify as being Jewish. Okay, you discussed that issue with regard to Israel. How else do we, as an organized Jewish community, inspire our youth to want to cast their lot with the Jewish people?
I started by saying
in 2 words or
in
less.
2 words or less.
Yes. Not good.
You know,
I have
good. No, again, I say this to every single group that I speak to, and it's nothing new, but it pays. Just like we say the Shema twice a day, 3 times a day, we have to say this over and over and over and over again. In this remarkable society, which is America, you don't have to be a part of the religion in which you were born. There is no transference of identity simply by virtue of who your parents are. America creates the opportunity for you to choose your identity. You have multiple identities simultaneously, in which Jewishness is only one part of it. You have an American identity, you have a gender identity, you have a socioeconomic identity, you have hobbies. You have so many things which define who you are, and Judaism is only one part of it. There is no secret to Jewish continuity and to passing on Jewishness to your children, other than making sure that Judaism has value to it. In an open marketplace of ideas, only that which religion, only that which stands for excellence, only that which is of value will be valued. Now, are we creating the possibility for that? And it could be Judaism and it could be Israel. Are we creating a Judaism of excellence? And frankly, usually we're not. What we want, and again, you know, I could say this because I'm not your rabbi. No, really, tomorrow morning I'm on a plane, I'm going home. You don't have to like me. Like, it doesn't matter. It's like you don't pay my salary.
Or you have to like me.
That's true.
That's his issue.
I'm glad you clarified that. Yes.
But like, frankly, we know. Like, you insist, not you, many Jews insist that our religious leaders coronate them as paragons of excellence regardless of what they do. We've removed, our rabbis can't be our critics. They get fired. We want masseuses. Tell me how wonderful I am regardless of what I do. Now we know there are certain things that create a meaningful identity. Jewish day school, synagogue affiliation, going to camps, visits to Israel, classes, Jewish experiences, youth groups. There are things that if you do them, create that connection. But we want our children to be Jewish without any of the above. And then we want a 10-day trip in university when they're 20-something to fix all the failures of of what we gave them for 20-something years. You know, again, I teach this. This is an essential feature of our contemporary Torah. And it's a Torah which was taught by Private Benjamin by Goldie Hawn in the movie Private Benjamin. She said as follows at the end of the movie: anytime someone promises you the world for 10 cents, chances are you're getting something that's not worth a dime. You want to pass on something to your children? We have to start being critics of what we're producing. And we have to recognize that our children aren't going to be committed to things simply because we are. If we have one of the most remarkable religious traditions, let's teach it. Let's create commitment. Let's create avenues of exposure, avenues of experience, sustained avenues of experience. It's about sustained relationships. There is no secret to Jewish continuity. The answers are all there. We know every Pew survey. We know exactly what makes someone more or less committed. We just have to care enough not to talk about Jewish continuity, but to actually do something about it.
Imam?
My 2 words is, again, Shir Hadash.
That's great.
If we cannot sing this song in a different melody, we are going to lose them.
Yeah.
The problem that we are facing is very similar to American car industry and what happened to Detroit. For so many decades, people were stuck with certain types of cars. Now the market is open to all many different options. I have a 10-year-old son. At that age, he's telling me, if you want me to be Muslim, you have to deserve it. You have to sell it to me. Like, I have so many other options.
Yeah.
I have so many other competing ideas and ideologies. Right. It's not like you are born into one reality and you are stuck with it. Those days are gone. We have to sing this song differently if we are going to raise our children faithful Jews and faithful Muslims in this religiously, spiritual, capitalist environment, open market environment.
Right. Well, part of that open market environment is open conversation, like you've engaged in here tonight, and we're very grateful to you. I'd like to give you just a minute each to share any closing comments you want to make before we finish up.
Absolutely. The world is not lacking of good people. The world is not short of moderate, peaceful, God-fearing, God-loving, merciful, gracious people. But part of the problem is Jewish-Muslim relations in this depressing situation, because part of the problem is overwhelming majority of Jews and Muslims are moderate, but they are lazy. They are silent. They are inactive. And for many of them, unfortunately, they are blind and numbed that they don't understand how, I speak for my community, their silence and laziness and inactivity is empowering the fringe crazies who are running the show. Let's not be moderate. I hate that word. Let's be radical peacemakers. Let's be radical members of the choir singing new songs to God with our actions, by putting our money where our mouth is. Bizrat Hashem.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Rabbi?
I want to end with something that I learned from my friend James Carroll. And when he taught this to me, it changed my life. Sometimes someone says something that from that moment on, you see things differently. He was speaking once at the Hartman Institute, and he was speaking to a group of Israelis. And he said, don't give up hope. He said, I could speak to you as a Christian. Look where we Jews and Christians are today. Nobody would have imagined this in any period in the last 2,000 years. What Christians did to Jews is far worse than what Muslims did to Jews. And he said, we changed. We changed. And if Jewish-Christian relations could change, then Jewish-Muslim relations could certainly change. My only bracha to every one of us here, my blessing to everyone here, is don't give up hope. Just don't give up hope. We need to find a way to live in a dark time, in a time in which most of us, what we're working on is to try to have a different world for our grandchildren. It's not going to be immediate. It's not going to be tomorrow. But the forces of evil, they have 200-300-year plans. The forces of good despair. Let's hold on to that hope in the midst of a dark time, because that hope will give us light and give us a direction for how we ought to live our lives. And if we live lives that way, we are living lives of value. And to live lives of value is the essence of what we're here on earth to do.
Thank you. You are demonstrating to us how we can move forward. You're engaging dozens and dozens of people who are in leadership positions in the Muslim community, in the Jewish community, to see each other in a new way and to understand that there is a way for us to move forward, that we can change the world and move it in the direction we want to move it in. When I myself sometimes feel like the world is such a depressing place and I'm losing heart, I remember what my Uncle Solomon told me. And he said, if you don't like the news, then go out and make some of your own. So if you don't like the news, these wonderful people are demonstrating to us how to go out and make some news of our own, because there's a world to repair in small steps, small baby steps. There are bridges to build. There's a divide that needs to be healed. So God bless you for all the good you do in this world. God bless each of you for being here and for all the good that you do in this world. We will continue the dialogue, and you'll be hearing from us. So thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.